Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is obvious that the world is shifting in very dramatic events in this period. So we are moving through unipolarity to multipolarity. But the question that raised here is that if it is possible that this transition could come through peace or through, because we saw some signs these days that Donald Trump signed a treaty in Egypt for a peace in this conflict between Israel and Gaza and Hamas. And in Ukraine, it is possible that could come the peace in maybe 1 year, we don't know. And we have to analyze what is happening. There are a lot of conflict tensions in the world, and we'll talk all these very hot topics with a very special guest, Arnaud Develay. Hello, Arnaud.
Hello, thank you for having me.
It's a great honor and pleasure for us. So, Arnaud, I will say a few words about you for our Romanian audience. So, you were trained as an attorney specialized in humanitarian and international criminal law. You are a member of both the Paris and Washington State Bar. You started your career under former U.S. Attorney General Ramsey Clark, and you represented some very important persons in international stage, as Ramirez Sanchez, called Carlos, and also some other very important person as Saddam Hussein, ex-former president of Iraq. Also, you defended some persons from Bashar al-Assad government in Syria. And it's important to mention something closer to Romania. You helped as a lawyer, Yuri Aroshka in Republic of Moldavia, who is now in a very special situation because he was convicted to 4 years in prison. Of course, on fabricated reasons, in my opinion. So, Arnaud, let's start with the situation in Middle East. As I said this Saturday, a treaty of peace, a plan in 20 points, and he wants to make peace between Palestine and Israel. Do you think there is any chance that this plan will succeed?
Well, we have to ask ourselves the question: are the root causes of the some would say the conflict? I would say the blatant and naked aggression of the Zion. Were those root causes addressed in this quote unquote peace plan of Donald Trump? The answer is no. I would personally think that this represents a PR, public relation operation from Donald Trump to essentially placate Benjamin Netanyahu, and in so doing, provide him with an exit from a situation which was, and basically, which threatens to spin out of control in as far as the narrative that's been spun out for decades in as far as the colonial project in the region. Donald Trump would not have acted the way he did if he did not enjoy support from a large establishment of the Zionist lobby, be it in America or even within the colonial entity. The idea is to portray Benjamin Netanyahu as an anomaly, someone who did a disservice for whatever reason. Some would say personal reason, political reason, some would even say eschatological reason. But basically, he hijacked the project to preserve his own personal interest, and he had to be stopped. And in so doing, there had to be gathered a consensus which would allow for such a PR operation to be carried out in a way that looked as if it was a relief to the Gazawi population, which has suffered for 2 years non-stop, and still continuing um, from policies that, and it's not me saying it, it's the International Court of Justice, are akin to a genocide, essentially. We will see what the ICJ ends up deciding. The procedure is still ongoing, but suffice it to say that all the elements seem to point toward a concerted policy aimed at eliminating, in whole or in part, a very specific set of people. So obviously, within the MAGA base, there has been also a split the last few months. Let's not forget that Donald Trump was elected on the platform as a man of peace. He was supposed to be putting an end to forever wars, to disentangle America from a conflict which does not reflect its interests. And when we saw what happened last June with as the US were still negotiating with Iran over this issue of enrichment, suddenly diplomacy was thrown by the West side and military options was favored. We realized that those promises were basically that, promises, and that Donald Trump, although he has a different style of communication, is still pretty much on board with a Zionist policy and a Zionist viewpoint as far as disregarding Palestinian rights. And so what we should look at in this plan is that the two-state solution, for instance, and he was asked directly about it during the event in Sharm el-Sheikh,
Yes.
he basically decided not to answer the question.
Mhm.
He even made a fun out of it. One state, two states, which states, So they don't really care. They just want to basically try to put an end to that sequence. We know that in parallel to this, the powerful Zionist lobby through the ADL in the US, which is kind of the point organization on any kind of social engineering and political maneuvers, got started on raising awareness among members of Congress about the dangers posed by TikTok, the application TikTok, which is Chinese social platform, but which is the only platform that allows, through its algorithm, unknown accounts, people with no followers, no subscribers, to enjoy the same visibility as established accounts. And those people, by and large, like a trickle effect, were able to make a big dent in the narrative that was imposed forcefully in the West during those last 2 years, that indeed the victim was the assaulter and vice versa, and that things did not quite look as they were saying, it was. So in so doing, they presented that the fact that American users' data would be at risk of something had to be done to bring this TikTok America branch under American control. But in fact, it was really all about trying to plug this loss of control of the narrative regarding all the events that have followed since October 7th, 2023. And so they succeeded in doing so. TikTok America will come under the control of Oracle, which is headed by Larry Ellison. Larry Ellison is the foremost contributor and financier of the Israeli armed forces, and he will make sure that those algorithms come into conformity, quote unquote, as any other platform in as far as the characterization of what's happened. They also bought CBS and placed at the head of CBS someone named Barry Weiss, who's also known as a staunch Zionist. So, see, all this was a concerted move basically to reassert control over a situation which had become extremely complicated and that was threatening to unravel 6-7 decades of weaponized information as far as the Cornwall project is concerned. But there already are doubts that the Israelis will honor their obligations. Some of the dead, quote unquote, hostages, they are not hostages, they are prisoners of wars, since every Israeli citizen is obligated to serve at least 3 years and is then on reserve for the rest of their lives, pretty much, as an army of occupation. So, even the semantic use here is very misleading. But in any event, they already are dragging their feet and trying to call into question, the accord, essentially. They also are double downing on demanding that Hamas be disarmed. Hamas will never disarm.
Exactly. Yes.
Yes. And all this is contingent, of course, on a withdrawal of the Israeli forces, but not out of Gaza. Will be only implemented over 3 to 8 months, and it's conditioned to some of the conditions demanded from Hamas. So it's a unilateral arrangement, and does not reflect the fact that technically, despite media-wise, and some would say even militarily, when one looks at the report of forces in presence, Hamas won this conflict. So this is just another sequence which characterizes the Middle East conflict. Following an active phase, we go through some kind of a muted phase, but all the ingredients are present so that in the foreseeable future, hostilities will again, occur. So let's look at the technicality of the deal. So basically, all the Gulf Arab states will be financing the reconstruction. There are talks of a consortium being created, headed by the butcher of Iraq, Tony Blair, although there are already resistance about this, but it seems that the decision has been made. And we can expect basically a two-tier arrangement where the lords and masters will reside and occupy those apartments, luxury apartments in this Trump Riviera, which is what they're calling it now. While what remains of the Gazawi, those who were not convinced to live on their own volition in exchange for a few $1,000s, to a country that remains to be decided. The Israelis are working behind closed doors with several countries trying to parlay some kind of arrangement where they would receive some kind of considerations in exchange for them taking a bunch of Palestinians. We've heard about Libya, we've heard about Sudan, we've heard about other places as well. So you can make sure that the Israelis are still bent on continuing the ethnic cleansing. This is their the way they've been doing it ever since 1948. It's a drawn out process. They know that they cannot just overnight transfer 2.5 million people. So they try to basically eliminate some of them militarily, starve another bunch of them, and convince the rest to leave forever. And those who will remain, they might be 500,000, 700,000. They will be living in some kind of humanitarian refugee camps, which will be completely digitalized with special recognition. Because you have to understand that Gaza has been a laboratory, essentially, for decades of the policies that we are soon going to be seeing in Europe. All those social methods of control. So this is all I have to say on this on the Gaza topic.
Yes. So for me, it's very strange that in this deal, peace deal, it wasn't any representative of Palestine to sign. The Hamas leader gave a statement, but it's not the same thing. Donald Trump and the president of Egypt and some others, they signed, but Palestine was not invited to sign anything. And there is no promises, as you underline, of a two-state solution. So the question is if Donald Trump is just a puppet of the Zionists, or if he is very smart and he's just acting, pretending that he accomplished the plan of the Zionists, but actually he has nothing else to do because the lobby of the Zionists is so strong in the United States. I watched Tucker Carlson show last week, and he saw that during the 12 days war between Israel and Iran, there were some militaries of Israel in Pentagon which gave orders to the American generals. So Tucker Carlson asked, what is going on here? How is it possible that this Israeli military come to give orders in Pentagon, in the United States? So people, they have no idea what is the pressure that is happening in the United States with this lobby of the Zionists. So what do you think? Trump is just a puppet, or he is a very smart actor?
I think Trump is first and foremost an opportunistic individual. And essentially, what he wants is not incompatible with what the Zionists in Tel Aviv want, except that it does not want to necessarily be perceived as having its hand forced. It's all about public perception, I think, with Trump. But fundamentally, whether they decide to eliminate Palestinians slowly or quickly, I don't think it really matters to him. I mean, don't forget that he's married into it. Some suspect that he even converted to the Lubavitch sect. He attended a special event a few months back on at the grave of the late Rabbi Schneerson. Let's recall for our viewers that Rabbi Schneerson was once touted as the Jewish Messiah. He died in 1994, and he's the same rabbi who met young Benjamin Netanyahu in 1990 in Brooklyn, and basically enjoyed him to pursue and work toward the great Israel and the arrival of Mashiach. So it's all connected. It's a small club. It's the same thing. Taken under the wing of no less than Roy Cohn. Roy Cohn, who was not a religious Jew by any stretch of the imagination, but he was a staunch Zionist. Like many of them who started on the left in the 1950s, 60s, and following the 1973 war, they all turned neoconservatives. And so it became more important to favor at all costs the survival of the colonial project, and somehow to work toward a situation where the interest of foreign policy between the US and the colonial project were reduced to almost nothing. And this is what we saw after 2001, where neocons infested the administration of Bush Jr., and it became almost impossible to differentiate between the policy objectives of the two countries, or at least this is how they presented it to us. And today we come to the final terminal stage of the narrative, which, despite all the images that are dripping on everyone's smartphone as to what's been going on there, it's almost impossible to avoid averting our eyes on what has happened. We're being told that they're fighting. They are the vanguard of the fight against barbarism, and they are fighting on behalf of civilization. So that's the old Samuel Huntington playbook. It's nothing new here. But this is what's basically being used to weaponize far-right parties in Europe. Because after 2001, the Zionist lobbies, they were mostly promoting mass immigration in our countries, and basically trying to impose guilt on the native population of those countries. They decided, following 2001, to switch completely alliances and start portraying their former charges as anti-Semitic, only because basically they were feeling solidarity with their Palestinian brothers, and they did not abandon those core principles, those core beliefs, even though they were now living in new countries. They remained staunchly and tightly sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. So that became a problem to the Zionist lobbies all over the Western world. And so the decision was made to switch and allow some populist party to have access to the media and maybe gain political ascendancy, as long as they endorse the colonial Zionist project, which a lot of them did. Some of them by opportunistic reason, others for really deeply held aversion to basically the makeup of the new people that were arriving in their respective countries. This took place, this crystallized in 2010 when pretty much all the European far-right parties were all invited to come to Jerusalem by Avigdor Lieberman, at the time was Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Of course, it's a long story, but as an open question, maybe it's not necessary to respond. I wonder if Donald Trump could act in a different manner, even if he would have the best intentions to make two states to help to end the Palestinian genocide against Palestinians. So I think it's not possible for Trump to be directly against the Zionists, because they would kill him. It is the single way to obey in this phase, of course. And maybe it's relevant what, yeah, maybe it's relevant what Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russian Federation, said about this plan, that it is the best one we have. We don't have something else. So at least it's good that the fire stopped, and maybe could be some perspectives to go further. Okay, let's move to another. Is preparing to take another phase against Iran, and these preparations with peace with Palestine is just a phase in this other plan against Iran. Do you think they would have any chance? Of course, the United States would back Israel, but let's remember what happened 2 months ago, when Israel attacked Iran, and when Iran responded, if this conflict would last another 2 weeks, Israel would be erased on the surface of the earth, because they managed to break Iron Dome with so many missiles that in the beginning were very poor, very small, but in the end they sent hypersonic missiles that made real damage. And what Donald Trump made at the asking of Netanyahu, he said, we will obliterate the nuclear facilities of Iran, and we sent some B-12 and they destroyed everything there. But it was a bluff, because the Iranians were informed in advance about what is going to be happened by White House, and it was no damage, actually, no real damage. So this again support the question that I formulated previously, that maybe Donald Trump is acting as being close ally with Netanyahu. So what do you think? Can emerge a war with Iran, another one, a stronger one?
Yeah, it seems like we're heading back to a second round with Iran. Obviously, the Israeli cabinet is obsessed. They know that to fulfill the Oded Yinon plan, and to establish themselves as a regional superpower. The only obstacle to this now, last time around, I mean, the decapitation strikes were extremely efficient. They put Iran on the back heel, but as you mentioned, the ballistic depths, range and depths of the Iranian arsenal is so important that they were able to slowly implement, as you said, a wave of different missiles types. First to detect, how the system worked, the Iron Dome, and then to exhaust it until some point where they were running out of those, I think, Patriot interceptors.
Yes.
And they were running out. Yes, they were running out. And it would have been maybe 10 more days until the colonial entity would have been completely exposed, and that would have been game over.
And
So
sorry, the cost
yeah,
for this interception missile is very high.
very
It's
high.
$1 million for each
Yep.
missile. And the rockets sent by Iran were very cheap. I mean,
A
200
fraction. Yeah, if that. Yes. Yes.
So it is a
Absolutely.
strategy that is an
Yes.
advantage of Iran.
Yeah.
And
Not to mention that.
let's remember that Iran is very close allied with Russia and China, who has a very important strategic interest to defend Iran. So if you start, I mean, if Israel starts and US war with Iran, they have to confront with Russia and China also, and all the BRICS.
Well, yes and no. I mean, Russia and China, especially Russia, is very legalistic. So they would not have contributed much to the extent there was a strategic agreement that was signed, but did not get implemented until very, very recently. I think not even 10 days ago, when the Iranian parliament finally ratified it, and it's into effect. But Iran needs a lot of military hardware. They have no air force to speak of. There's a big order bearing on Sukhoi 35. But it's going to take a while to deliver them. You have to train the pilots. We can expect maybe there were talk about S-400 being delivered, but no confirmation on that. A lot of cargo planes going back and forth, but again, nothing really confirmed. But at least now the agreement allows the framework, the legal framework, for Russia to provide the added the added military support in terms of equipment and in terms of military advisors. So the situation will be a lot more difficult as time goes on, and in that sense, the window of opportunity for Tel Aviv to act is getting smaller and smaller. So the real question will be to see whether, after the PR success of Trump in Sharm el-Sheikh, and he alluded to Iran. He said, yes, Iran could be part of the prosperity arc. They could even come to sign Abraham Accord. They even invited Iran to Sharm el-Sheikh, which, the foreign ministry of Iran said, we're not going to be attending a conference with people who just attacked us a mere 3 months ago. It doesn't make any sense. So to be somewhat thorough on the issue, no, I don't think, especially when you look at the partners in the coalition, the Israeli government, there's no room for Iran to be left alone. And I think it will be the opportunity for Trump's hand again. Right now, the main element of language seems to be that the 400 kilos of enriched uranium are nowhere to be found. And Rafael Grossi, the on the payroll director general of the IAEA, has also basically confirmed that this uranium, this enriched uranium, is unaccounted for. So you can begin investing all the media, the main media outlet, and they will try to again, raise concerns that they are about to make a bomb. This is one of the reasons why Iran, although it had all the legal grounds to do so, refrained from withdrawing from the NPT, because then that would have provided the excuse necessary to resume military action. So we'll see what happens. But they already went back on the snapback into full force. And on that particular front, I would assume that China is doing its part and making sure that Iran gets access to, medicine, or any kind of consumer goods, anything they may need to continue to function, because obviously the game is not over.
Yes, and Arnaud, it's important to observe that in comparison with what it was in 1967, when Israel managed to defeat 6 nations in that 6 days war, and it was an event very relevant 2 weeks ago when Israel bombed Doha, the capital of Qatar, and it was a surprise because the military in Qatar noticed that their defense system that was delivered by Americans did not work against the Israeli missiles. So they did not know that the defense system has a setting that does not work against America and Israel. So they are defenseless in this situation. And Saudi Arabia has the same defending system, and they went to Putin. These are not good for anything. And we saw that Saudi Arabia made the military agreement with Pakistan, and Iran is involved in Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So there are some other relationship there. It's not so easy to defeat Iran, or if the conflict spread. Okay, but it's a huge analysis.
If I may say something to this particular.
Yes.
And Kissinger had said so many times before that you cannot trust America and by extension the Zionist entity. I mean, those Arab states have completely surrendered their Islamic duties, their ethics. They have lost all credibility with their own people, and this incident in Doha was really revealing in that sense that if need be, there's a choice to be made between them and Tel Aviv, they will always come second. So that might actually be a watershed moment, in their realizing that, notwithstanding all kind of Abraham Accords or whatever nonsense, excluding the Palestinians from some kind of bartering deals, if the need requires it, they will be thrown under the bus in a second. So let's hope that they learn the lesson this time
around. So let's talk a bit about the situation in Ukraine. You live in a close area of that part of the world, and you are very well informed in this topic. So what do you think, how much European Union could support anymore this conflict? Because of course Donald Trump is making business. He is sending weapons to NATO, and NATO offers these weapons to Ukraine. And now we saw that Donald Trump somehow he agreed to sell Tomahawk missiles that are able to strike in the deepness of Russia. This would be very, very dangerous, and Tomahawk can support even nuclear weapons. And President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, said, if you are going to do this, we are considering that it's a nuclear provocation, and we will respond. So do you think things will escalate, or we can expect in near future that Ukraine will recognize, will admit that they have no possibilities to continue.
Well, a few points to clarify before answering this question. Number one, there's no such thing as Ukraine or Ukraine-Russia conflict. It's NATO using Ukraine as a proxy. Ukraine is not an independent state. It has no sovereign will of its own. It is just a proxy. So we're dealing with decision makers in European capitals. And second important point to keep in mind is that whether you are positioning yourself from Russia's perspective or now more and more so from the collective West, let's call it this way, but more specifically Euroland, it has become on both sides an existential war, meaning that none of those parties, opposing parties, can afford to lose. Those fundamentals make it that the stakes, for that reason, all the talks that Donald Trump was going to come in and resolve the issue in, what do you say, 24 hours, that it was going to be 100 days, it was always just campaign talk. Donald Trump, when he says this is not my war, he's the president of the US. The US is 1 degree of separation away from frontal confrontation with the Russian Federation. It's not me saying it. It's the New York Times in a very detailed and thorough article that was published about a year and a half ago. NATO providing equipment and intelligence and finances, essentially is again 1 degree of separation. They basically tell the Ukrainian proxies where to shoot. They are right behind them on the battlefield. As you mentioned, with the Tomahawks, okay, the Tomahawks, we're talking about 40 to 50 Tomahawks. If the order is confirmed, that would be delivered to Ukraine. But you would need satellite operating personnel to make the use of those weapons effective. So between delivering those weapons and actually using them, there's a big stretch. Also, keep in mind that Tomahawks is not the first or the only one of those long-range missiles. We've had also the Storm Shadows. We've had the Taurus, German Taurus ones. So the West is basically somehow, on the whole, I would say, refraining from going that route. They don't want the conflict to escalate to such uncontrollable levels. So it's really a war of nerves right now. What I would say is that since this vaunted summit in Alaska on August 15th, almost 2 months ago now, today actually might have existed around this summit, that pretty much evaporated. It's gone. No progress has been made on the consular and diplomatic property issue. There were talks about reestablishing direct flights between Moscow and American cities. No progress on this. There have been talks about American companies doing business in Russia or in consultation with Russian companies in Arctic circles, or in the context of maybe even exploiting some of the resources in Ukraine. But interestingly enough, there's been no talks about Russian companies going to America to work. So we can see that this is all basically nice intention, nice talks. The fact is that, as you know, they are playing for influence around the president of Russia. And increasingly now we can hear more and more the voice of those people who feel that we're being strung out, we're being strung along. We need to look after our own interest. There's nobody coming to the rescue. There's no cowboy coming on a white horse to make peace. We're going to have to do what we need to do to guarantee, one, the territorial integrity and physical integrity of Russian ethnic speaking population in what are now former eastern oblast of Ukraine, because those regions expressed their will through referenda. They expressed their right self-determination and voted overwhelmingly to become subject of the Russian Federation. So this needs to be taken into account. So preserving the sanctity of those Russian regions, those new regions as they are being called, and to the extent there are considerations bearing on long-range use of long-range weapons, provide a protection zone that goes beyond those some more westward, and so at some point we will be facing the situation of what will the European do. The Americans basically, they want to delegate this European theater. This is more and more being underlined by the faction represented by Vice President J.D. Vance and a faction from the CIA. They are called the restrainers. They want to pivot to China. They know that China ultimately is their big opponent, a competitor, peer competitor in the 21st century. They consider that this proxy war against Russia was a big mistake. It only led to the rapprochement between the two Eurasian giants. So they want to completely retool this, but it doesn't mean that they want to completely abandon it. They just want to subcontract it to the Europeans. But in so doing, the Europeans have no means to, on their own, follow up with the conflict. Why? For several reasons. First, they don't have the troops. They don't have the industrial base, because neoliberal and woke policies, that's part of the globalist agenda, have had the perverse effect of rendering their capacity to keep up with the Russian manufacturing of shells and other missiles completely inadapted. So it's going to take a while, and that's why we're hearing about this gigantic 800 billion plan to rearm Europe. We know that in Germany they intend to make Germany, the largest army, most powerful army in Europe, raising from 140 to 260,000. But in so doing, they're going to have to basically again shoot themselves in the foot, because all the weaponry, and that was supposed to be what Europe was all about, supranational entity. Even if we go down this path of analysis, would be able to export European-made product. Here, this is not the case. As we've seen for years now, for 20 years at least, countries like Poland, they get money from Brussels, and when it comes to their own security needs, they purchase American F-35s. When Europe has a lot of models, you have the Rafale, you have the Tornado. There are a lot of good European fighter jets, but they're buying F-35s. So this means that NATO essentially has completely selected the civilian face of NATO, nothing more, nothing less. Which is why we've seen election interference the last 2-3 years in key countries on what is considered NATO's eastern flank. And so what we're seeing is kind of like a shading of all pretenses of European supranational, harmony, and more like some kind of golem, the relay to purchase all their weaponry from Washington. That's the diktat of Donald Trump. While America pivots towards China and focuses on South China Sea, Europe will be left to, quote unquote, contain Russia's territorial ambition, which, of course, I put a lot of quotation mark on this term. So this is where we are now. It's an existential issue for Europe. It's brought nothing but ruins and abandoned dozens of millions of people into poverty, and they need need somehow to cement their supranational authority at the level of the European Union, and fanning the flames of a conflict with Russia is a way for them to do it.
Yes, and let's be honest, the objectives that they settled from the beginning, I mean, from February 2022, are not fulfilled. And I mean here, demilitarization of Ukraine, denazification is very important and very real, and also to stop genocide in Donbass, because we know very well that after the coup d'etat in 2014, the Kiev regime that was obedient to the West bombarded Russian ethnics in Donbass, and they killed more than 14,000 people. And in this condition, the Minsk agreement was not respected anymore. How can I say, legitimized by the UN treaty, because they are member of Security Council of UN, and they are legitimized to intervene to stop a genocide. And
yeah, this is actually the argument that was presented
yes.
To the International Court of Justice as a party before the ICJ. And their opening argument, their main argument, was that the Russian Federation violated their obligation per the Genocide Convention by invoking such convention as a justification for special military operation.
Yes, they are
so
twisting,
this argument, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, this shows the mindset, you know. But interestingly enough, those arguments from Ukraine aside, and that allows Russia now to, and they have done so, submitted a 522 pages memoir, which documents all the elements pointing out to the impending genocide that was about to take place on the eve of February 24th, 2022. So we'll see. The case is still ongoing. All the elements I just mentioned are still confidential until the procedure is complete. But at some point, we will probably get to see the full scope of what was about to happen before Russia stepped in. I would add one thing also, is that this on the basis for the special military operation is really at the core of the narrative here. As we speak now, the Council of Europe and quote unquote Ukraine have signed an agreement to create a special court to, I quote, calling to account the Russian leadership for the act of aggression. So this is very important. This narrative is very important. If somehow this shenanigan, this kangaroo court is allowed to impose a narrative which completely undermine the reason why Russia acted pursuant to Resolution 2202, the Minsk Accord, in order to enforce the goals and objective protection of ethnic minorities, this could be a turning point. And so Russia should really be careful about keeping an eye on this and not dismiss it right out of hands, because on that side of the conflict, on their side of the conflict, people know what the truth is, but on the Western side, a lot of people don't necessarily understand. So it would be interesting and important, I would say, if not indispensable, on the side of Russia, to really be reactive and not allow these proceedings not to be contested in any way, shape, or form, even if it has to come through a civil society initiative. But it's important that the contradiction be brought to this this project. We are in an hybrid warfare age. So there are military operations, there are crypto legal operations, communication, information, propaganda. Everything has to be taken into account, and you cannot just dismiss right out of hand what appears on its face like a vain effort to revive European interest in, mobilizing against the Russian threat.
Yes, and Russia is not in hurry because the stake is much bigger than this war in Ukraine. The stake is the shifting of international order to multipolarity, and a lot of things has to be correlated. And of course, Russia is making a cleaning up inside Russia, because we know that there were a lot of oligarchs that served the interests of the West, of the oligarchy of the collective West, better said, and they are cleaning in Russia, and this is
You're
everything
alluding
correlated.
to the topic of corruption as a general topic?
Yes, we could
Yeah.
refer to this, but many institutions, as it is in United States. So in Russia also it was the deep state that act against the national interest of Russia, and now after 2022 they managed to clean the situation, and in China also. But these are big subjects. Let's move to
No, that's
European
interesting
Union.
that let's actually have a touch on this subject. I mean, briefly, if I may.
Okay, sure.
There are a lot of things, a lot of people don't know that following is 24. And before he even took the oath of office for the ongoing term, Vladimir Putin went to give a speech to FSB Academy, which he knows very well because he once directed this organization. And he gave a speech and he said, he congratulated the cadets on their jobs, and he reaffirmed and re-emphasized some of the competence, and was want on stressing the need more so than ever, even though it's been an ongoing process, to fight corruption. There's really a concerted fight to clean up institutions. And I can tell you that if you read Russian channels, every day almost, there are arrests at all kind of levels. It's unbelievable. At the governor level, in the police, in the armed forces, at the highest level of the armed forces. There was, for instance, some of the highest authorities in the Kursk Oblast, which, as you recall, were invaded by Ukraine in August 2024. Russia only recently managed to evict the last Ukrainian invader, but there were funds that were allocated to build fortifications. Well, those funds disappeared. There were never fortifications built. And so, sure enough, this led to what we saw in August 2024. I can tell you that I wouldn't want to be the person or the persons who participated in the embezzlement of those funds. So there's definitely, we have to be careful. It's never all black or white. There's also, a lot of stereotypes and propaganda about certain practices in Russia. But I can tell you that the president of Russia has the legitimacy now to, go full. Understands that you cannot be a modern economy, and it's not me saying it. It's international institutions ranking Russia as number 4th economy. You need to have a legal system that is really up to par. You need to have something that protects foreign investors if and when those foreign investors are convinced to do business in Russia. You need to protect their interest. And you need to make sure that the likes of situations like what happened in Kursk never happens again. Because how are you going to rally the people behind you if you allow those dereliction of duties to go unpunished? So be sure, make no mistake about it, there's a concerted effort across the board to smack down any type of documented. The FSB is very busy. They run investigation. They're very good at what they do. It's just that we only hear about the occasional, failure, as in any anti-terrorism or anti-corruption law enforcement organization. 99% of the time, we never hear about the successes. But I can tell you that in snippets of information, it's every day that corruption is being cracked down. So just wanted to rectify the record on that.
Yes, thank you very much. Actually, we could notice that all the countries in the world are more or less infiltrated by these agents of globalism,
Of
because
course.
actually the fight is between nationalism and globalism. Many countries want to be sovereign, as Romania, France, Russian Federation, China, United States, but they don't succeed, most of the countries, because they are infiltrated with this kind of agents, especially through secret services. So let's move to European Union, and I would like to start with France, because I did not say in the beginning, but you are French citizenship. And I want to point something that is very important for us Romanian. There are some infiltration of secret services from France in Romania. We had presidential elections last year in November, and it was a candidate, a very special candidate, Călin
And
Georgescu,
Moldova.
who won. Yes, he won the first round of elections, and the system was desperate, absolutely desperate, because they were in a confrontation with a situation that they could not control anymore. They cannot manipulate, and they canceled all the electoral process. In the second tour, even the people started to vote for so the manipulation, the fraud of the vote did not help at all, because Călin Georgescu would win. So they canceled the elections. Everybody, all the world know this. Of course, in United States, in everywhere, they are discussing this. It's outrageous, absolutely outrageous. But it was an interference from France. For instance, the ambassador of France in Romania had, before the coup d'etat in December 6th, talking with the chief of Constitutional Court of Romania. And this discussion was completely out of the law, because the ambassador has no attribution to has some opinions with the chief of Constitutional Court, and the Constitutional Court of Romania canceled the elections under the pretext that it was a Russian interference. And another interference was with the chief of the secret services for external information in France. His name is Nicolas Lerner.
Voilà.
And Pavel Durov, the chief of Telegram, made a confession, a public confession. He actually sent this message to all the users of Telegram, that the chief of secret services in France asked me to intervene on Telegram to censorship the posts that supporting this Romanian candidate, and I refused. And it's very significant. And let's mention former European Commissar. I think he was
Thierry
appointed
Breton.
again.
Yeah. Mhm.
Thierry Breton, yes. And he said, we did it in Romania, we are going to do it in Germany if necessary. So he admitted that European Union interfered. So now we see that, of course, with Romania is a special topic. I don't want to start this topic now, but let's talk about France, because it was the seventh prime minister of France who resigned. And Macron is in this position that he is very difficult to form a government. And of course, we saw the protests, Yellow Vests. By the way, you represented Yellow Vest as a lawyer, and you know very well the situation. And what is happening in France? Could democracy win? A real democracy win in France?
Well, the problem with France, but not only France, is that that political class is just a transmission belt between globalist or Euro globalist interest. They're not there to represent the French people. They're there to have the population somehow swallow the transposition of EU directives, which very often lead to basically consequences that are adverse to the population. So in that sense, Macron is acting as a go-lighter in a European occupied province, which is called France. France has no power to speak of as a sovereign state anymore, and for quite some time. It does not control its borders. It does not control its currency. It cannot devalue the currency if need be. It does not control even its armed forces, because now NATO controls, the only thing it has left is the permanent seat at the UN Security Council and the nuclear weapon, which is now being discussed to be shared with the Poles and the Germans. So what we have to understand is Macron has no legitimacy in France. Following the European elections of June 2024, which saw the National Rally win in a comfortable margin, Macron decided that to basically create this direction, to obfuscate this very bad look, he would dissolve the National Assembly. He called it a live grenade. I threw a live grenade in their lap. That's what he said. But in so doing, he has accelerated the long-standing dysfunctioning nature of the French political system as a system that cannot address the needs of its constituents. And I would say more than that, he has completely obliterated the function that he occupies, because under the current Fifth Republic constitution that was adopted in referendum in 1962, the president of the republic is supposed to be above the parties. This new constitution was actually adopted to resolve this constant jockeying of game of musical chairs that characterized the Fourth Republic from 1946 to 1958. And in so doing, in 2000, when they lined up the calendar, the political calendar schedule, to basically put on the same, on the same year, the presidential election followed 5 weeks later by a parliamentary election. They transformed the head of state essentially as a party leader, someone who arbitrates when need be, as opposed to being this very economic voice that once in a while addresses the people on very important issues. And so this is where we are right now. And the Macronist movement, as we call it, has completely failed. I mean, he has completely, but some people say it's an incompetent. He's not an incompetent. He's actually very good at what he does. If we understand that his job, when the oligarchy picked him up and promoted him through their media, through this judiciary coup d'etat, which saw his main rival in 2016, 2017, François Fillon being taken out of the game on some obscure story of suits, unpaid for suits. Anyhow, Fillon was stupid enough to say that if anybody was to be subjected to an indictment as a political person, figure, especially running for election, he should desist himself. So basically, he provided the stick with which they beat him up. But that's another story. But the oligarchy essentially, Macron is the candidate. He's been selected by the oligarchy. From the moment he served at the Ministry of Finance under Hollande, whom he ended up backstabbing afterward, to his accession to the
Sorry,
Elysee
he
Palace.
worked in a Rothschild bank, isn't it? He worked in a
Rothschild
bank.
Rothschild. Yeah, he's a Rothschild baby. Yes. And actually, there's a lot of questions surrounding the transparency of his declaration statements as to how much he owns. He declared that he only owns 37,000 euros in a savings account somewhere, when we know that he operated financial operations, leverage buyouts, not to mention his very mysterious role in facilitating the sale at vile price to the American General Electric of one of France's key industry, Alstom, which is, through the Mirabel system, makes the nuclear civil plant work. So France was the owner in total of the entire chain of manufacturing of civilian nuclear plant. By selling the most important part of it to the Americans, he basically surrendered French energy sovereignty to Washington, because you can buy it back, and I think France did so, 3 times the price that they sold it to GE, but you still need to get GE's permission to sell it to a third party. So everything that General de Gaulle essentially built painstakingly to make France a complete sovereign state in terms of its energy needs has been completely dilapidated, and Macron is part of this. Macron has been presiding over the fire sale of many industrial jewels. And while at the same time promoting such policies as the Mercosur, which basically, even though France could be the grenier, could be could be feeding all of Europe, save Russia, of course. We went from 2 million people working in agriculture to 400,000 in 20 years. It's 75% less. And at the same time, the Ministry of Agriculture has increased fourfold, because they have to play the busybody to basically, try to deal with the constant manifestation of discontent. So the situation is really dire. Illegal immigration is out of control. 93% of the individuals that are apprehended and ordered to leave French territory remain on the territory. Crime is skyrocketing. Streets are not safe. More and more, the image of the country is being degraded. France is being kicked out of Africa. It's a complete Berezina on all fronts, to be honest. But when one thinks to stops to think about the whole thing, we actually are tempted to think that this is all part of the plan. Because France, France is not France anymore, it becomes a mere Euro region, transferring the latest remnants of its sovereign powers to Brussels and lowering its image in the world. For this French quote unquote political class, you were talking about globalist infiltration. It's perfect for them. Their reward will be to be first in line when the time to elect the first president of Europe will come. And this is what Macron is banking on. So now Macron is facing a situation with this. All the situation is of his own doing. But in the end, he cannot call for new parliamentary elections. This would be too dangerous, because it would see the National Rally probably gain more votes. And this strategy, this tactic of preventing through some unnatural, against the grain alliances with completely outspent and discredited political parties, establishment political parties, to prevent the National Rally from exercising power, would probably this time be like the last straw. I don't think it would work. So he's come to call back Le Cornu again. So we'll have a Le Cornu 3 government. And he managed to get the socialists, Hollande's party, who only scored 1% at the last presidential election, and LR, Les Républicains, which is Sarkozy's former party, to basically come together to form some kind of machin, something, as de Gaulle would call it, this kind of undistinguishable, which has no legitimacy whatsoever. And so we can expect a vote of censure, to, no confidence, to basically be formulated, in the coming days. So the constitutional crisis, the political crisis will keep getting worse and worse. But you have to keep in mind one date in your back of your mind. It's March 2026. By March 2026, not only in France, but also in UK, in Germany, orders have been given 2 or 3 months ago to get all the regional medical and health facilities ready so as to be able to admit thousands upon thousands of wounded. So this could basically mean that by spring of next year, there might be some false flag operation, which would then see European countries to get involved in directly this time in the conflict in Eastern Europe. So this is something, and this we have to remember that no matter what country you're talking about, whether it's Merz in Germany, Starmer in UK, I call it the Three Stooges, and Macron in France, all three of them are politically discredited. They are failed. They are imprisoning their own citizen in UK for posts and tweets. In Germany, we have a counter-natural alliance when the AfD should have been part of this coalition. In France, same scenario with National Rally. They cannot. I don't think they will wait until, for France, if anything, that they will wait until the presidential election of 2027. They would rather, in Germany, respectively, declare AfD illegal and ban it. The Basic Law of 1948 allows them to invoke certain provisions to do so. In France, after having convicted Marine Le Pen, they will try to create additional judicial cases. They will apply what Thierry Breton called the democratic shield. This is what they call it, democratic shield. In other
Yes,
words,
indeed.
Brussels will not suffer any contradiction. They've come too far on the roadmap. The next step, the next stop is a supranational federal state, federal superstate. And if they have to go to war to consolidate and neutralize the remaining remnants of oppositions in all the respective countries where those opposition can make a difference, they will neutralize them. They will use every tool at their disposal to do so, notwithstanding what J.D. Vance told them.
Yes. Actually, we can see that the globalists are relocated from the deep state in the United States. The head of the snake was there until recently, but now they moved in European Union and they use European Union. All the countries, they are making orders to the governors of these countries, as Romania, to act in supporting the war in Ukraine. This is very important for them. Why? Because they want to defeat the unipolar order. We know that actually United
The
States was
multipolar.
not,
Yeah.
yes, United
Yeah.
States was not actually authentic pole of power. It was the globalists that were using United States as the global gendarme, policeman, to make regime change and to make revolutions and all kind of actions in order to create a new world order that was actually a satanic order used by these globalists that are occultist in transnational organizations. So they channeled all the efforts in European Union in order to help Ukraine. You very well mentioned before, it's not a war between Ukraine and Russia, it's a war between the globalists and Russia. And they are acting against the national interest of every country. Romania, for instance, is completely destroyed. I mean, we have no money from salaries. We need to borrow money from the IMF and World Bank and all kind of globalist organizations because Romania does not produce anything anymore. All the industry was destroyed. We are just a market for the multinational from the globalists. And it's the same pattern in all the European Union, more or less, of course. Okay, so one last topic, if you agree. Let's talk a bit about Venezuela. We know about Monroe Doctrine that United States has from 1823. They want to control all the Western Hemisphere. They consider this hemisphere as our backyard, they say. And now they want to control Venezuela. Of course, it's easy to understand because Venezuela is a country with very big natural resources, especially oil, but
The most.
others, gold, diamonds, and many others. And they have this pretext that is Venezuela is trading with drugs, and they need to stop these cartels. What do you think? They will escalate these tensions? I mean, the Americans, the globalists, actually.
Yes, we can expect tensions to increase. I mean, let's recall that under Trump 1, Venezuela was already a target, and so it's nothing new. Uh, the narrative being peddled as far as drug enforcement operation is concerned is nothing new in South America when it comes down to U.S. Um, regime change operations. We saw it in 1989 in Panama when Ortega, who used to be a CIA operative, he decided to one day operate out of his own whim and was punished for it. And the explanation, the justification for Operation Enduring Freedom, I think it was called, was that he was responsible for all the drug coming into Miami. In Colombia, for decades, Washington supported far-right governments because they were concerned that the FARC, if in power, would be a vector of drugs. And they are putting the same thing with the Maduro government. Maduro himself has now what I think a $5 or $10 million bounty over his head as the trafficker in chief, but also is Minister of Defense. So it's nothing new. But yeah, I think what we're going to be seeing in that sense of this regrouping in this regional consolidation, the U.S. is going to probably focus more and more energy on regime change in Venezuela. The thing is, Venezuela might be a step too far this time around. It's not a pushover. Chavism, as a Bolivarianism, has been around since 2002 now, in its current iteration, and people understand that if it weren't for the sanctions, the Venezuelan people would live very well, keeping in mind that their standards of living have already increased from prior to the arrival of Chavez in power. So there's a strong sense of patriotism in Venezuela. Venezuela can also count on its ally from the multipolar world and global south.
Exactly.
Iran has been helping Venezuela. We reminisce about that 5 years ago, because that's
An
what you were
official,
saying is
sorry, an official from China said, if you Americans, if you are going to attack Venezuela, you may consider this is an attack of China, because China wants the Venezuelan oil for their future development.
yeah, they want the Iranian oil and they want the Venezuelan oil. That's right. And
Yes,
Venezuela is the top oil reserve in the world.
exactly.
Let's be clear about this. The only problem is that being under sanction, they don't have the facilities to refine the oil, so they have to import it. That's the completely absurd situation we find ourselves in. They have
But
the
they
most
have
oil, but
perspectives by joining BRICS. They apply to become a BRICS member, and it's very possible. And if they join, they will going to be helped by China, by Russia.
mm,
They are, however,
they're already being
already
helped. I
now.
think we
Yes,
don't know
they are
everything,
helped already.
but they
Mhm.
are they are advisors, military advisors, and probably some measures are being implemented to prevent and dispel any kind of invasion, which is probably why the Americans are contending themselves so far to stay offshore And what's outrageous, as was underlined by Gustavo Petro, the president of Colombia, was those two boats that were basically carrying, smugglers, people who were trying to escape the country. There was no trial, no arrest, and those people were just blown out of the water. Well, that's an act of war, essentially.
Yes.
So,
Okay, Arnaud, please tell us few words about BRICS. What do you think? It is an organization that is in expansion. It's emerging very fast. Only China itself has an economic power absolutely astonishing. Some analysts say it is already the first on economic
in the
graphic.
world.
So
Mhm.
BRICS is advancing with de-dollarization.
Mhm.
These states are not trading between themselves with dollars or with euros, only with gold and their currencies, or their
Mhm.
national currencies. So I think this is a very important vector of multipolarity. What do you think?
Well, what's important to say is that I will echo what was said at the Kazan summit last year. That BRICS is not built in opposition to anything or anybody, and especially not the dollar. We heard tropes about the creation of a new global currency to replace the dollar. There's no such plans. It was a marketing PR operation when they showed this bill, but there's no plan on doing so because this will require the building of a supranational bureaucracy, not unlike what we see in the EU, and the idea is to stay away from this. So we're dealing with a loose alliance of countries who decide to basically do business as among themselves because many of them have been victimized and recipient of sanctions very often by the United States, and they're tired of being prevented from trading.
Exactly.
So they have come to create their own structure. And you mentioned China.
And,
China just signed.
sorry to
Yeah,
tell you, but even the fact that they are an alternative to the globalist organizations
it's too
like
much
IMF,
already.
World Bank,
Yeah,
this is a threat for them, for the globalists,
of
because they
course.
don't support to be only hegemon. The
That's right.
globalists want the hegemony of the planet.
Yeah.
If there is an alternative, it already becomes their enemy, and they don't accept this. And BRICS there to be an alternative.
Yes. Yeah, and actually, as far as Africa is concerned, because we haven't really spoken much about Africa, but Africa is experiencing a complete revival now. The alliance of Sahelian states is showing the way in Pan-Africanism, in application. And lots of countries around the Sahel are now considering potentially emancipating themselves from neo-colonial tutel. So, in that sense, China just signed, I think, a month ago, an agreement with no less than 53 African countries on the use of an alternative to SWIFT called the CIPS, CIPS, that allows them to sell their goods to the Chinese market without having to convert and pay the expenses associated with conversion of currency in a way that really brings some currencies for themselves, and that completely bypasses SWIFT, and they make the technology available to the African partners for free. You don't have to pay to use that technology. So that was a news that was somewhat pretty much ignored in the mainstream media, but it's a huge change. And you were mentioning the concept underlying BRICS. Yes, you will be able to the extent your currency is backed by natural resources and or gold, which the two top holders of gold today are China and Russia by far. You can do your transaction. There will be a special ATM machine when you can do the transaction in any kind of currency, within the BRICS world, without having to deal with the euro or the dollar or any kind of a central bank, as it were. So it's a revolution. It's a revolution. And
Absolutely.
as you said, the globalists are not going to stand pat and let it happen, which is why it's all connected. Because if you take down Venezuela or Iran, you handicap the development of China. Now we hear this big controversy about the rare earth minerals
Yes, yes,
monopoly of
indeed.
China,
Yes,
and
I know.
you know that in the realm of digital technology and computers are becoming obsolete almost every
And
6 months.
weapons, missiles,
Of
weapons.
course, it's all connected. Yes,
Yes,
the ramifications are endless. So things are coming to a head, I think, right now. And either the United States and its allies or its vassals, uh, even though they are instruments now of globalists, come to terms with the new emerging multipolar reality. They can join this reality as equals and benefit from its fruits, or they can keep convincing themselves that that 500-year window has not closed, in which case we might be going to major troubles. Let's put it this way.
yes, and I think it's worth to mention that the dollars are not only a weapon, but they are fiat money. I mean, they are not backed by gold or some
Mhm.
authentic values. They are just printed. And this creates inflation, and it's a huge fraud because if I print money and I buy a real value, of course it's a trick. So the BRICS countries does not accept this anymore,
No,
and I can understand this very well.
this time is
Okay,
over.
so as a conclusion, Arnaud, um, do you think there is any chance to make this transition to multipolarity without war in a peaceful mean?
Well, we have to be remain optimistic because the alternative is really not good. But we also have to understand the deep nature of the globalists. I mean, the globalists are not unlike the French Jacobins or the Bolshevik of yore. They are, it's all or nothing for them. They have this conception of
Exactly.
tabula rasa. They want to create a new man, completely disconnected from its roots, from its biological determinism. They want to eradicate the traditional family. They want to eradicate traditional beliefs. They want to eradicate everything that makes us who we are to create something
And
that is still a
it's
work in
possible
progress.
it's possible that they would prefer to destroy the world with a nuclear war instead losing power. So this is also
Yeah,
worth
you
taking into
cannot
consideration.
auscultate, yeah, this possibility in the mind of those people who are,
Yes,
let's
I
be
think
honest, living in their own ivory towers.
the anti-globalist power has to be very wise because if you
Patient.
provoke the globalists, they act
Yes,
like a mad, like a
yes,
satanic.
yes.
Okay,
I
so
agree.
let's see and let's hope that
Mm.
the situation will move in a peaceful way. And
Pianissimo.
of course, in my opinion, the multipolarity is inevitable. I mean, it's multipolarity or destruction of the world. And
Mm.
I think the peace will and the justice will succeed.
We
Arnaud,
can only
thank you
hope
very
so.
much. It was a pleasure to talk with you and an honor. And I wish you good luck in everything you do. I know that you are doing very, very important things in international stage as a political counselor, not only analyst. And I'm sure you are going to make important deals in everything you do. Thank you
Thank you,
again, and
Galstrand.
I thank to our audience. God help us. We end here. Goodbye.
See you soon.